All right, fourth grade friends, welcome to your final math lesson as a fourth grader. Pretty exciting stuff. Before we jump into it today, we'll go over our class norms again real fast one last time. We know that right now we want to be respectful to others around us. We want to have a positive attitude. We want to keep trying even if something is difficult, and we're going to remember the word yet. All right, so you can see right here, I've got your learning target for you today. And we're going to continue comparing fractions, although this time what we're going to do is we're going to use a number line to compare fractions. So you see right here, I've got 3/4 and we're comparing it to 11/12. That's going to be the example problem that we look at today. Now, in your learning packet, you've got this page right here. This is comparing fractions with a number line. And you can see we've got a number line right here. We've got 0 on one end and 1 on the other. And all of these fractions that are between 0 and 1. You notice that some fractions are on their own, like this one right here, 1/12 or 1/8. Or you notice that we also have some equivalent fractions like 1/6 and 2/12. So anytime you see two fractions on this number line like that, 2 or more, there's some where there's even 3, all of those are equivalent to each other. So like a great example here is 1/3 is equivalent to 2/6 is equivalent to 4/12. And if you went and created 3 bars that were the same size and you broke those bars into thirds, sixths, and twelfths and compared them like we did in our last video, you would see how those are all equivalent to each other. Now, this time instead, we're going to use a number line. And we can use a number line in a couple different ways. We can do it to compare what we know about fractions, and we can compare to 1. So we're going to compare those fractions and compare how those fractions relate to 1 or 0. So I'll show you first with what I mean with when we're comparing to 1. So I'll remind you our example problem is 3/4 and we're comparing that to 11/12. So I'm looking here right now and I have got, I'm going to find 3/4. It's right here. And I'm also going to find 11/12, which is right here. And I'm comparing those to one whole. And what I'm going to do is I'm trying to figure out which one is greater, and I'm going to use how far they are, their distance from one whole, to figure out which one is greater. So from 3/4 to 1, it's about this far away. Whoop. Once again, so difficult to do with one hand. I'm actually using my elbow to hold down the paper right now. Very sneaky. So here's the distance from 3/4 to 1. And here's the distance from 11/12 to one whole. And when I start looking, I'm noticing that the distance from 11/12 to one whole is much smaller than the distance from 3/4 to one whole. And that tells me that I know that since 11/12 is so much closer to one whole than 3/4, that means that 11/12 is going to be a larger fraction when we compare it to 3/4. So I can go and I can take that example problem earlier. I'm comparing 3/4 and 11/12, and I know that 11/12 is going to be greater than 3/4, or 3/4 is less than 11/12. That's how we would read that number sentence. Now let's look at another one, but we're going to compare to 0 instead of 1. So I'm going to go over here, and I want to compare 1/12 to 1/4. 1/12 to 1/4. And now I'm going to compare them to 0, but this time, instead of the number that's closer to 0 being the larger number, since we're working towards 0 and we're kind of working backwards, instead the number that is closer to 0 is actually going to be the smaller one. And you can already see this, I'm sure, but I'll just draw these lines so it's really clear. So here's my distance from 1/12 to 0. And here's my distance from 1/4 to 0. And you can already see that the distance from 1/4 to 0 is much greater than the distance from 1/2 to 0. So if I were to compare those, and I'll write this down real fast. So I've got 1/12, a little box to put in my comparison, and 1/4. Oh, I'm sorry, I said 1/12 and then I wrote 1/2. And 1/4. And since I said 1/12 was much closer to 0 than 1/4 was, I know that 1/4 is going to be smaller. So 1/12 is smaller than 1/4. That's how we would read that number sentence right there. 1/12 is less than or is smaller than 1/4. All right, fourth grade friends, the rest of this last sheet should be pretty straightforward. You're filling in parts of a whole, and from there you are comparing how many thirds are equal to 4/6. So you need to think you're given a bar that's split into thirds here, and you need to use that to help you figure out how many thirds would be equivalent to 4/6. You can use that bar. You could also do some converting, which we've talked about in the past. And then a similar problem, use this bar to show how many twelfths are equivalent to 4/6 and write an equation below. Fourth grade friends, that is your last math lesson of the year. And next time we all do math together, you're all going to be fifth graders, and I am going to be in my new teaching job as your fifth grade math teacher. So if this is the last time that you're hearing from me, I hope you have an amazing summer. I can't wait to see all of you again in the school year. And I can't wait to dive into some more math together in the future. I will see all of you next year if I don't see you sooner. Bye, fourth grade friends.